Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, with the new release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, we're going to be going over my top 3 hardest challenges that Indiana Jones has ever faced. Now coming in at number 3 for me is going to be the iconic opening sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now after leading his crew through the forest, Indiana Jones finds the temple and has to go through the booby traps with what's left of his crew that hasn't turned on him. In stealing the idol and accidentally setting off the trap, we see that Indy, as cautious as he is still prone to error. Now meanwhile, while the temple is crumbling around him, Indiana Jones has to outrun a boulder while also avoiding all of the booby traps ahead of him. This sequence perfectly sets the stage for the rest of the film because it tells us what we need to know about Indy as a character, how he thinks, how he gets in over his head, and how he barely survives. Now while the temple is crumbling around him and a boulder is headed straight toward him, he also has to deal with his last crew member, who of course turns on him when he gets the idol in his possession. Now with no other options, since Indiana Jones doesn't have his whip, he has to jump over the pit and grab onto a root that's barely alive. Now what makes Indiana Jones so appealing as a character is that he's not an invincible action hero that you'll see like in most movies today. Now Indiana Jones is actually vulnerable and he has to rely on his brain to overcome obstacles like this. Now after narrowly escaping that mess, we see that his crewmate wasn't so lucky. Now Indiana Jones grabs the idol and continues to run through the crumbling temple. The boulder begins to close in on Indy and he doesn't have a second to rest. Steven Spielberg did a perfect job in setting up the rest of the movie with this sequence. With the boulder merely feet away from Indiana Jones as he's clutching the idol, he sprints to the end through cobwebs and jumps out of the way at the last second. Now you'd think after all that, Indiana Jones is safe. Not exactly, he's completely surrounded. Now coming in at number 2, we're going to have to jump to the second movie in the franchise, The Temple of Doom. And it's going to be this iconic scene of Indiana Jones cutting a rope bridge to defeat the cult. Now Steven Spielberg worked hard to create a dark and spooky sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark in The Temple of Doom. In the final thrilling scene of this movie, Indiana Jones attempted to cross a rope suspension bridge to get away from his pursuers. They end up surrounding him, and really his only choice is to cut the bridge. Now what was really scary about this is that Steven Spielberg said this was an actual bridge suspended over 150 feet above rocks with clear water above them. Spielberg explained on the extras that a local dam building company built this bridge for the film on short notice. Now after cutting this bridge down, Indiana Jones has to clutch onto it without falling off as he slams into the rock in front of him. Now after surviving that, we see that still a couple of the cult members are surviving, hanging onto the bridge with Indiana Jones. Now Indy has to hold onto this bridge with whatever strength he has left, or else he will meet his fate with crocodiles. Plus, he also has to dodge falling cult members. Now on top of being outnumbered, Indy has also had another disadvantage because he's below all the cultist members, so they're able to kick at him and do whatever they need to do. Now after making his way to the top, he comes face to face with the leader, who begins to kick at him, and they struggle for a bit. They start trading punches with each other while holding on with one hand. Indy gets rocked in the head, and the cult leader begins to try to rip his heart out like we've seen earlier in the movie as he chants. Now at this point we can only imagine he's exhausted and just relying fully on adrenaline. Now with all these factors in mind, this is why I decided to make this number 2 on my list. But now what we've all been waiting for, coming in at number 1, we're going to be jumping right back to Raiders of the Lost Ark for what is possibly the best scene in that movie. Now there is so much to unpack in this scene. Indiana Jones has to steal a truck carrying the Lost Ark. Now before this scene you're witnessing here, Indiana Jones had to successfully board the truck by jumping onto it from horseback and throw out the passengers. Now, what is so brutal about this is that he was just shot in the arm, and this guy's just railing at him right where he's been punched. So now imagine that you've just been shot, and someone's punched you in your wound about 3-4 times. You get thrown out the windshield of a truck, and now you have to successfully try and reboard that truck. Now the other guys in front of him tell him that Indiana Jones is still hanging onto the truck alive, so the guy begins to step on the gas so he can ram into the car in front of him to hit Indiana Jones. Now Indy shimmies his way down right before they hit each other, and just imagine he's sliding on a bunch of dirt and rocks going, you can imagine how fast. Now after hanging on for dear life as he slides down, he uses his whip as a tether on the bottom of the car, and we just see him being dragged across this dirt and rocks, swinging back and forth, and then he begins to climb back up the rope and eventually makes it on the back of the truck. Now Indy climbs on the side of the truck as he swings into the door to kick the guy right in the face. Now after all this and being dragged, he manages to repossess the driver's seat, and we can see his anger starts to kick in. He slams the guy's head on the dash about 3-4 times, and then he throws him back on the hood, and it's hilarious because he's like, hey, now you try. So this guy's like, alright, let me give it my shot, and he gets run over. Now pissed off Indy here, we can see him slam on the gas and begin to close in on the car in front of him. He rams into the side of him. Now seeing him wince in pain here at the end, it's a great way to remind us that he's human, and this isn't some superhero that's basically invincible. And then we cap off this perfect scene with Indy pulling in and all the townspeople covering him up, and it's just a perfect ending. Now with all this in mind, I'm sure you can see why I had to put this in number 1 as to probably the craziest thing that Indiana Jones has ever survived. Now I decided to throw in a bonus clip in the end. It's an honorable mention, and it's where he had to fight the big Nazi guy.
Junge, komm runter da! Runter jetzt!
Now that's going to bring this video to a close. I'd like to thank everyone who's watched this and checked out all my other videos. I really appreciate it, and you guys have a good one.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?